Senator Romney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like Senator Menendez indicated, I am sometimes overwhelmed by the degree of starvation, the migration as associated with climate change, and the problems in the world are so enormous. How do you decide where to intervene and where to spend the money? How do you prioritize all the things? I mean, because we don't have enough money to get everybody out of poverty, to solve all the hunger problems in the world, to solve all the migration problems in the world, to solve all the awful things that are going on in the world. We're not there. There was a time when the U.S. economy was like half that of the world. Today, it's like 15%. So we simply can't do everything we'd like to do. How do you decide where to spend the resources? What is your priority for tackling their various challenges?
Thank you. And I don't have time, I think, to do justice to the full sort of way that we do prioritization. We are also 90% earmarked, so some of that prioritization is taken out of our hands, but it's only really by sector. So your question is still very valid in terms of what we do. You know, even if we have X amount for malaria and X amount for TB, where do you do it? And there, I think, governance and where that dollar is likely to go further matters a great deal, particularly if we're working with state and local government. USAID has just last year launched an Office of the Chief Economist to actually bring, we've done measurement, evaluation, learning about particular programs for a long time, but we're now bringing a best buy mindset, literally doing cost effectiveness studies, randomized controlled trials. For example, a programmatic intervention where we hire a contractor or give a grant to an organization, how does that compare against giving cash in a particular community? And seeing, there's some studies that show that through cash benchmarking that actually giving just small amounts of cash allows, for example, somebody to start a business or get the access to capital that they need locally. So we want to make sure we do a cost effectiveness filter through the work that we do everywhere. We, of course, look at the nexus with U.S. security, pandemic prevention, lab surveillance, global health security. That's an example of investments that have really increased, although unfortunately are down in the 24 budget that was just passed. That's an investment in our lives. The same with our clean energy work. Of course, it's one thing to have the Inflation Reduction Act here and be lowering emissions over time, but we know that there are many big players like South Africa, Indonesia, countries in which we work where their emissions affect Americans just as much as ours do.
Yeah, I guess I actually would hope to have a more clear priority that yes, there has to be an enormous humanitarian need, but there also has to be a very clear U.S. interest in intervening in that particular area. And yeah, we don't want to waste money and so forth, and you mentioned those things, but there has to be some prioritization. My impression is that the Chinese, for instance, their economy is about the same size as ours, particularly if you look at purchase power parity. Their economy is larger than ours on that basis, but they're not spending anywhere near what we are in the world, other than to support Chinese interests. Hopefully, we will apply the same metric to decide where we're going to be spending our funding. Has there been work done at USAID to compare, here's what China does, and if there is, I'd love to see a report or if there's work like that that's around to say, here's how they do it. I know they do things with debt. They loan the money. We say, no, we don't do it with debt. We give them money, except we borrow the money from others to give the money away. Which is smarter, us borrowing to give it away or them just loaning it? And I think we may have something to learn from a country that says they're going to make those investments where there's humanitarian need and where it's in their national interest, and two, to do it in a way that's economically the most frugal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a fair point there, of course, around prioritization, but, the PRC is not, as you're noting, is not motivated by the humanitarian imperative that moves so many Americans. the service impulse, the kind of compassion that we have shown, which...
The challenge is that
No, I understand, but I'm just talking specifically about
the needs in the world are so enormous
I understand.
that when you look at those needs, you have to say, we have more interest, for instance, in Haiti than we might in some place far, far away, in part because it's in our neighborhood, all right? So we're going to show priority there. We have interest in Ukraine because we know that the old Soviet Union did some really bad things that we fought for decades, and so we want to keep that from happening again. I mean, there are national interests that would strike me as being high in the priority. I know my time is up, so Mr. Chairman, I will stop. Ambassador Power, if there's something you want to say, fine, but I'll pull back.
Thank you. Just simply to say that I believe that filter is applied. I also believe that we play a long game, and had we been narrowly transactional in the way that the Chinese are 40 years ago, many of the countries that are now huge sources of huge markets for U.S. goods would not be markets for U.S. goods. Many of the diseases that have been prevented would not have been prevented had we just gone, again, in that what matters in the here and now and what is our national security matrix on this particular day or this particular year. So I think we have to have the right balance between absolutely looking for that nexus, making sure that our dollars go where they're intended, looking out for things that are happening in the hemisphere that have a direct bearing or things that relate to disease or the health of Americans for sure. But we're also, making investments now whose payoff may not be evident for some years in the future.